Good afternoon, and you're very, very welcome to this event today, organised by the all-party parliamentary group on the Yazidis as part of, I suppose it's the unofficial fringe programme surrounding the UK government's international conference on preventing sexual violence and conflict, which started this morning. And over in the Queen Elizabeth Centre, they'll be looking at strengthening global response, prevention, justice and accountability, supporting survivors and children born of sexual violence. And as chair of the all-party parliamentary group on the Yazidis, I was struck by how closely that aligns to what we have been calling for since this group was first established back in 2016. And probably the only thing missing from the conference agenda would be that recognition and a declaration by the UK government what happened to the Yazidis after 2014 was a genocide. And that case is one that we will continue to press with others across both houses of parliament. But we felt that the conference was an absolutely ideal opportunity for us to raise again the plight of the Yazidi people, a people that, by and large, following the military defeat of Daesh, have largely been forgotten by the world. But as far as we're concerned, and I'm sure you will agree, that the issues of justice and accountability for the Yazidis have not been addressed. Support for victims of sexual violence and those children born of that violence have been well below what is required. And there's no doubt that the global response to these atrocities does need strengthening. And whether it's governments, parliamentarians, NGOs, charities, or as individuals, we all have a role to play in ensuring that we prevent such things happening again. And as the APPG for Yazidis, we wanted to use this platform and this conference to once again raise the issue of the 2,700 Yazidi women and girls who were kidnapped and sold into sexual slavery and who are still missing. We will not forget them, and we will continue to demand that the international community does everything in its power to find and release these women and girls and prosecute their abductors without fear or favour. It's been 8 long, painful years since Daesh launched its genocidal attack on the Yazidi community, committing some of the worst atrocities imaginable. But as I said, after a few weeks in the headlines, the world's attention moved on, leaving just a few dedicated but committed people, survivors, lawyers, experts, civil society representatives, and politicians who are working tirelessly to ensure that justice, however long that justice takes, and however long it is delayed, that it is delivered to this most beleaguered of communities. And I'm delighted that we are joined by some of these people this afternoon. It's great to see Fiona Bruce, MP, who is the Prime Minister's Special Envoy here today. I know she's incredibly busy over the next 2 or 3 days. So to have you here, Fiona, thank you so much. Delighted also that Hala is here. Hala is a survivor, as is Zina, and who will be speaking later on, well, very, very shortly, be telling their survivor stories. Abid is here, who is the Executive Director, we're very, very welcome, of Nadia's initiative. We have Dr. Leyla Ferman, who is no stranger to us and has been a huge support to our APPG. She's the founder of the Yazidi Justice Committee. And we also have the indomitable Dr. Evelina Okab, who not only does Evelina provide the secretariat for the APPG and Yazidis, but she does so much to ensure that across both houses of parliament that human rights, international law, justice and accountability remains at the top or thereabouts of our political agenda. We're also extremely fortunate to have with us the remarkable Hannah Rose Thomas. It's wonderful to see you again, whose extraordinary work in portraying women in conflict has been celebrated around the world, and we're honoured to have her today unveiling her latest portrait, which Hannah will talk about later on. And let me say about that portrait. It's a portrait of a Uyghur woman, which was due to be shown today at the main conference, but for reasons known only to themselves, the FCDO refused to have it on display, and so they now have a a photograph of it, but we are honoured that Hannah has brought the original for its first public unveiling today, and Hannah will talk a little more about that at the moment. We've got loads to get through. Did I say we did? Yes. I'm looking at it. I'm sure I saw Baroness Kennedy come in. But before we start, I'd love to invite Baroness Kennedy to say a few words.
Well, listen, it's just really great to have everyone here, and particularly to be discussing the subject of the Yazidi women, and to see my great friend Leyla here too, and her colleagues, and all those who are in Parliament and beyond have been raising this issue. You spoke and paid a tribute to the wonderful Evelina. I have the great good fortune of her working at the International Bar Association's Human Rights team, and she is there also a great asset to us. Now, the IBA Human Rights Institute has been working, collaborating with Aziz, with a number of leading lawyers, and a piece of very powerful research was conducted to look at the issue of genocide in relation to the Yazidi women. And I just wanted you all to know that Leyla has really been the sort of instrumentalist in making this work happen. And the research was done, and it showed that it was to look at the issue of genocide being a responsibility that states have to prevent, and therefore there being liability if states fail to act. And as you know, the Yazidi women and the Yazidi people suffered at the hands of ISIL, which is not a legitimate state. So the challenge that was made to international lawyers was that we weren't going to be able to prosecute the very people who had conducted this, but that there were responsibilities that fell on other states to prevent. And as yet, this has not been something taken up in international courts, but we feel it should be. And so it was identified that there were 3 nations that bore particular responsibility: Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. And for different reasons, there had to be, as well as being a legal assessment, a political assessment on where greater success might be take place with regard to a prosecution. But that report shows the level of evidence that there is against those 3 nations. But I think that politically, the decision is likely to be that the most effective nation to prosecute would be Syria. And I think that the world would come together feeling that Syria has behaved in the most disgraceful ways towards its own people, as well as towards the Yazidi people, and not protecting. And I think that there would be the will to do that. So we're working on whether that might be possible. And that work has got Arif Ibrahim as very much at the heart of it, along with others. So I don't want us to be hopeless about as we look forward. I do think that that one day there may be justice in this whole field. But I'm going to return it to our wonderful chair, who has been a really great champion of this issue in Parliament, and with other parliamentarians. I see people around the table that I know have worked hard. I want to pay tribute to this committee, this parliamentary committee, for the work it's been doing.
Thank you so much for that. Very kind of you. We are very often we hear stories first, maybe second, third hand of what went on, and that sometimes the conversation can become quite an academic or quite a political conversation. But I think it's incredibly useful for us never to lose sight of the first-hand account, and we are so honoured today to have 2 young women survivors of this atrocity, who from Sinjar, who are now living in IDP camp, and we have Hala and we have Zina. So Hala, Hannah, Hala and Zina, and we're most grateful for Shireen for translating. So if I can maybe ask Shireen, do you want to take over and just ask the girls to tell their story?
شكرا على إتاحة الفرصة، وشكرا للقائمين على تنظيم هذا الاجتماع المهم. Thank you for providing this opportunity and thank you for organizing this important meeting.
اسمي حلا سفيل، ناشطة وعضو في شبكة الناجيات الأيزيديات. معي أيضا الناجية زينة خلاط، وهي زميلتي في شبكة الناجيات. يسرنا المشاركة معكم في هذا اللقاء وإبداء رأينا حول التحديات والمشاكل التي تواجهها المجتمع الأيزيدي بعد مرور أكثر من 8 سنوات من الإبادة الجماعية.
My name is Hala Safil and I'm activist and member of the Yazidi Survivor Network. With me, Zina Khalat, my colleague who's also a member of the Yazidi Survivor Network. We are pleased to participate with you in this meeting to discuss challenges facing the Yazidi community after more than 8 years of genocide.
إنها فرصة جيدة أن نلتقي بعدد من المهتمين بشأن الأيزيدي ونناقش القضايا التي تخص مجتمعنا ونبحث بإمكانية إيجاد حلول لها.
It is a good opportunity to meet with a number of people who are interested in the Yazidi issue, discuss issues that concern our community, and discuss the possibility of finding solutions.
كناجية أيزيدية قضيت 3 سنوات من عمري تحت أسر تنظيم داعش الإرهابي، سنوات لم تكن فيها شيء يدعو إلى الحياة، بل كل لحظة فيها كانت تعادل الموت أبدا، حيث تعرضنا لما لا يقبل الضمير كسائر النساء الأيزيديات اللواتي أصبحن ضحايا.
As a Yazidi survivor, I spent 3 years of my life in ISIS captivity, years in which there was nothing called life, but every moment was equivalent to death 1,000 times over. As I was subjected to heinous crimes, as were all other Yazidi women who became victims of ISIS atrocities.
أكثر من 7000 شخص أيزيدي جلهم من النساء والأطفال أصبحوا ضحايا وتعرضوا إلى جرائم ذات من الإنسانية. مناطقنا وبيوتنا وممتلكاتنا تعرض إلى الدمار والسرقة. تعرضت شعبنا إلى النزوح القسري وغيرها من جرائم إبادة جماعية وجرائم ضد حقوق الإنسان.
More than 7,000 Yazidi people, most of them women and children, have become victims and have been subjected to crimes against humanity. Our areas, homes, and properties have been destroyed and stolen. Our people have been subjected to forced displacement. We have been subjected to many genocide and crimes against humanity by ISIS.
بعد مرور 8 سنوات من الإبادة على إيد داعش، إبادة جماعية على إيد داعش، لا زال مصير أكثر من 2500 من النساء والأطفال مجهولا. أكثر من 60% من شعبنا لا يزال يتذوق مرارة النزوح، ومناطقنا لم تشهد الأعمار وعودة الحياة، وأصبحت مناطقنا مع الأسف ساحة للصراعات السياسية المختلفة، ولم يتغير إلا قليلا منذ تحريرها.
After 8 years of genocide, the fate of more than 2,500 women and children is still unknown. More than 60% of our people are still displaced. Our destroyed region and areas have not been rebuilt, and unfortunately, our homeland is now an arena for various political conflicts, and little has changed since the liberation of Sinjar from ISIS.
ملف المفقودين الأيزيديين لم يشهد الكثير من الاهتمام من قبل الجهات المحلية والدولية، لذلك يجب أن ندعو جميع الأطراف إلى تشكيل لجنة وفريق مشترك لكشف مصير هؤلاء وخاصة في مخيم الهول في سوريا والدول المجاورة.
The case of missing Yazidis has received little attention from the local international authorities. So we must call on all parties to form a committee or a team and to uncover the fate of these people, particularly in Syria's Al-Hol camp and neighboring countries.
صديقتي إذا عدت هالشيء فراح تضيف.
Now Zina continue this story.
مرحبا. الاجتماعي.
Good afternoon and thank you for providing this opportunity.
أكيد يعني أجيت وناجية كمان خصام يعني حلنا عن
I am a Yazidi survivor and I have same story as Hellas.
هناك بعض المبادرات الجيدة حدثت في العراق مثل قانون الناجيات واتفاقية سنجار والكشف عن المقابر الجماعية وجمع الأدلة، لكنها شهدت وتشهد هذه المبادرات تأخير في تنفيذ بنودها ولم تترجم بشكل صحيح لصالح الناجيات والناجين والمجتمع اليزيدي بشكل عام. لذلك لم نرى تقدم ملموس في وضع اليزيديين في العراق لحد الآن.
There are some good initiatives that have taken a place in Iraq, such as the Yazidi survivor law, the Sinjar agreement, the excavation of mass graves, and the collection of evidence of ISIS crimes. However, these initiatives witnessed a delay in the implementation of their prevention and were not probably properly translated to favor of the survivors and the wider Yazidi community. Therefore, we have not seen tangible progress in the situation of the Yazidi in Iraq so far.
نشيد بالجهد الوطني بالتعاون مع يونيتات في رفع الوفاة في المقابر الجماعية في سنجار، وهذه خطوات إيجابية، ولكن تحقيق العدالة يتطلب المزيد، وهو أن يقدم مرتكبي هذه الجرائم إلى المحاكم بعدل وشفافية، وأن تكون هناك محاسبة حقيقية على هذه الجرائم لتنظيم داعش الإرهابي.
We commend the national effort in cooperation with the UNITAD in exhuming the remains of the number of mass graves in Sinjar. These are positive steps, but achieving justice requires more, which is that all those who committed these crimes by brought to justice with fairness and transparency, and that there be real accountability for the ISIS crimes.
على جانب الخدمي وإعادة الأعمار، هناك عمل منظمات الإنسانية، ونحن نقدر جهود الدول المانحة في محاولة إعادة الحياة إلى مناطق المحررة، ولكن هذه المناطق لا تزال مدمرة، ويجب تخصيص الأموال الكافية من العراق والدول المانحة لإعادة بناء سنجار وتعويض الضحايا والنازحين وتمكين عودتهم الآمنة.
On the service and rebuilding side, we appreciate the effort of humanitarian organizations and the effort of donor countries to restore life to the liberated areas. But these areas are still destroyed and in need of more support. Therefore, more funds from Iraq and donor countries must be allocated to rebuild Sinjar, compensate to victims and IDPs, enable their safe return.
كما نجد من الضروري حل الإشكالات الإدارية والأمنية والسياسية في قضاء سنجار وسهل نينوى وتساوي الملفات الكافة وبناء قوة أمنية محلية من سكان هذه المناطق تلتزم بإطار الدولة وقادرة على الدفاع عن المدنيين.
It is also important to solve the administrative, political, and security problems in Sinjar and the Nineveh Plain, and build a local security force from the residents of these areas that adhere to the framework of the state and is capable of defending civilians. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
That's the same. Thank you so much to Hala and to Zina for sharing that with us. We really do appreciate it, and it reminds us just how important it is that we hear directly from you, so that it underpins the work that we do here, and it reminds us just how important the work that we do here is and the consequences that it has. So thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us today. We hugely appreciate it. We're also delighted that the executive director of Nadia's initiative has joined us. Abid has come here and hopefully we'll be able to give us a bit of insight into the work that's being done by Nadia's initiative, particularly around the issue of the missing women and girls. But Abid, thank you for joining us and we look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to join all of you. It's an honor to be here, and especially we're always honored to be at the same table with survivors, Yazidi survivors. Hala and Zina, women like them, have been spearheading the fight for justice for Yazidis, and they inspire all of us every day to fight more and more, because they are the ones that should be heard. And after what they said, I really don't have much to add in terms of the issues, the current issues facing the Yazidi community, because they have been through this from captivity, facing sexual violence and escaping on their own, and living now in IDP camps where they are facing nothing less than the genocide itself inside these camps in Iraq. Being displaced inside their own country for 9 years is nothing less than the genocide itself by ISIS. So I'm very happy to join all of you, but in addition to what they said, it's very important to go back one step and talk about the root causes of why we are at this table, why Zina is here and why Hala went through what they went through. It's because of decades of marginalization, decades of resource deprivation, decades of misinformation and hate against Yazidis as people, as because of their faith, because of their religion, because we are different. And that's very important to note. And obviously, as you all know, remember in 2003, this country was involved in the invasion of Iraq. And as a result of that invasion by the US and the UK, Yazidis were marginalized further and further. And they became vulnerable. And Yazidis suffer so much since the day of that invasion when the regime was overthrown. Obviously, no one wants to live under a dictator, whether it's Saddam or Putin or anyone for that matter. But Yazidis became a focal point of attack for radical Islamist groups after 2003, starting especially from 2007 with major attacks against Yazidi towns and villages in the Sinjar region. And it went on and on. So when we talk about this genocide in 2014, it was not a singular event. It was a process of decades before 2003 and especially after 2003. And we are at this table again also because, not solely just because of the invasion, but also because we were neglected by our own government, as Zina and Hala mentioned. When I say our government, both the KRG and the Iraqi government both marginalized and neglected and failed. And, I would say even intentionally ignored to protect the Yazidi community from this atrocity, from protecting women to be taken to captivity. And so, everyone has a responsibility. We all have a responsibility. We know so much is happening in other parts of the world. No one is asking for exceptionalism for Yazidis, but we are saying this is something that happened because everyone had a part in this process of genocide and sexual violence against Yazidis, including the UK, the US, and other countries that participated in this war, and then our own government that abandoned our people in Sinjar. And that's why we have Nadia here and Hala and others, thousands of Yazidi women that were taken into sexual slavery. And what ISIS did, we all know, was so evil that they separated Yazidi children and Yazidi women from one another, even taken Yazidi kids, boys into captivity to train them and call them caliphates, cubs, and still we have, as Hala mentioned in Zina, we have more than 2,500 Yazidi women and children who are missing. And what Hala said specifically is at the core of what we have been trying to do, which is rally the international community to create a task force, to create something, a coordinated task force to help us rescue the missing Yazidi women and children. We are working on this as Nadia's initiative, and others are working on this, we know. So many are trying, but it is not so easy to coordinate across borders, and especially most of Syria is under non-state actors. Parts of Iraq are controlled by militia, parts of KRG as well, parts, you know, we even have Yazidi women and children in Turkey in captivity. So it's an international operation. It's not something we as an NGO can do or Zina can do. It shouldn't be on them. We shouldn't put it on Zina and Hala and other Yazidi community members to be responsible for the rescue of these women and children and for the recovery of the Yazidi community from this genocide. And I know we're probably running on short on time. I don't want to take too much time, but what we are doing is we are making some progress in terms of collecting information on the missing Yazidi women and children in Syria and other parts of Iraq and Turkey. But it cannot be done without support from UK and from other countries to really get involved, because when the international coalition was established to defeat ISIS, until today, there has been no specific mention of rescuing Yazidi women and children from captivity. And in my opinion, this is morally wrong. And these countries that have participated in this operation have a moral responsibility to include these women and children in their plans to rescue them. In going back, because we are here at the UK Parliament, I think it's very important to note that, you know, the UK supported the mechanisms at the UN with, at the time, Ambassador Raycroft supported the establishment of UNITAD, in which, you know, Amal Clooney, our lawyer, and Nadia advocated for at the UN for years. We are at this point where we have Amal's team around, and you know, Amal has been a fierce fighter alongside Nadia and others to fight for justice. But we are at this point where we have thousands of testimonies and documents, and ISIS was public. There was nothing secret about what they did to Yazidis. But we're at this point where we need some. Nadia just mentioned at the conference across the street that we do not need more calls to action, but we need real action. And that's what we need right now, is that for the UK and others to join to make sure that this evidence is used to put ISIS members on trial for these crimes, especially of genocide and sexual violence, and to help us as a part of this process to help rebuild Sinjar and help the Yazidi community to return from these camps. Living inside your own country for 9 years inside camps is in my opinion a crime, and there is so much more that the international community, the UK and others and their partners can do to help the Yazidi community finally recover as we approach the 10th anniversary of the Yazidi genocide. And I think that's what we're here to talk about, that we need more international support. Going back to what I said earlier, we're not asking for exceptionalism. We're asking for what can be done there, because there are solutions within reach, including the rescue of women and children, including more support directed towards Sinjar, and not the camps in the Kurdistan region, including putting ISIS on trial, the evidence that has been collected by survivors, by Amal Clooney, by Nadia and others, to be used in a court of law, and that survivors, that Nadia says all the time, can have their day in court. And so I will turn it over to you, and thank you so much again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Abid, for your thoughts. And I think you're absolutely right. And no one, I believe, would disagree that you're right to be gathering information, but you do need the support of the UK and the international community in translating that into action. And I think you're also right to point out that the UK and others have a moral obligation to help And you do know that there are many MPs and peers in this Parliament who stand ready to help and to put pressure on the FCDO where we can. And it's something I think we should probably speak later about how we can translate those good wishes into actual concrete action between you and the members of this House. But thank you so much. We're now going to pass over to Dr. Leyla Ferman, who, you know, she's a co-founder of the Yazidi Justice Committee and the Director of Women for Justice, and was part of the team who produced the YCJ report. And it's just, if Dr. Ferman would give us an update on where the report currently is and the proposed legal actions that could possibly still come from it. I'm absolutely delighted that Leila's with us today.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me, of course, to this event. And I would like first to say a few words and to share with you my experience to make, well, to let you know how close the work of the Yazidi Justice Committee is to the demands of the Yazidis today. So with the beginning of the genocide on the 3rd of August 2014 and the dates right after, there were many questions within the Yazidi community. So who is the Islamic State? Who are the members of the Islamic State? How can IS members easily cross the borders to get into Syria and also to Iraq? Who is supporting IS and why are they supporting them? And why didn't states do enough to prevent this genocide? And if you bring up these questions together, it makes very clear that the work the Yazidi Justice Committee is doing is directly focusing on the demands of the Yazidis. So we are, of course, more than glad that we found strong partners here in London, and we founded the Yazidi Justice Committee, which is founded by 5 organizations: the Accountability Unit, us as Women for Justice, the IBA Human Rights Institute, the Bar Human Rights Committee, and the Jeffrey Nice Foundation. And we are more than glad to have 3 patrons, and one of them is Helena Kennedy. So really, we are glad and also proud of it, of course. So in 2020, we started investigating and collecting evidences on state responsibility on the Yazidi genocide in regards to the Genocide Convention, whose parties have to prevent and to punish genocide. And at the end, we published our report with our findings this year in July 2022. And because of these evidences we collected, we can say that at least 3 states violated against the duties of the UN Genocide Convention because they failed to prevent this genocide and they failed to punish also. And these states are, as Helena already said, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. And besides, furthermore, Turkey is also complicit to genocide by, for instance, allowing IS members to cross the border to Syria, or allowing them to smuggle also oil, by which they are funding also or funded their operations. So normally everything, if you ask the Yazidis, everything is very clear. There's a legal basis and there's a legal mechanism. This mechanism is available. We even don't ask for a special court or to found something new. There's a legal available mechanism. It is possible to for states who are parties to apply at the International Court of Justice to open a file case against Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. And now, of course, we can question ourselves, why didn't it happen so far? It is, of course, because states have interests. They have political interests, they have economical interests. But I can also for sure tell you that also survivors like Sina and also Hala, they could also find many reasons to say, I'm not ready to witness. It is not easy to witness and to share every time what happened to them. And just recently, I also spoke to a Holocaust survivor he was witnessing many times for many years. And even he told me that whenever he's telling his story, we can be sure that he cannot sleep afterwards. So it is a big suffer, the person and the survivors telling their stories. So they could find enough reasons saying that I feel very bad when I tell my stories, and who would care about my story? And anyway, there is no outcome when I'm telling it, but the survivors are anyway they are struggling. So because they are, of course, they are affected by this genocide, and so it is a deep demand of justice when they're talking. But just to let you know that it is also a struggle for them. It's also very, very, very hard. So we all would agree when it comes to impunity, and we all would also agree that the impunity of perpetrators, the impunity of individual perpetrators is a risk to a peaceful life of us all. No one would doubt about it. And we all would agree that yes, it is a risk, and it is not only a challenge, it is a risk. So impunity would facilitate and support crimes. No one would deny this. But I'm really wondering and asking you, do you think it is different when it comes to states? Of course not. So impunity of states is doing exactly what impunity of individuals do when we think about a peaceful life. So do you think it would be so easy for Russia to attack Ukraine when there wouldn't be an impunity of states? Or would it be so easy for Turkey to attack again and again northern Syria, Rojava? I think it is possible because of impunity of states. So I think that when the UN Genocide Convention, I mean the idea of the Genocide Convention was not only to say I would like to live in peace, so there's a need of peace also of my neighbors and also in the world. Yes, of course, that's an outcome, that's true, but the intent of the UN Genocide Convention was to create a value, especially after the experience of the Holocaust and the Second World War. These awful crimes happened. So the idea was that genocide shouldn't happen again. So, and to be aware of it, of course, the UN Genocide Convention has like a task to create a value. And if we don't make use of available legal mechanism, it would also mean somehow also to deny or to prevent also the protection of social and also of legal achievements. So when it comes to our issue, back to the Yazidi case and the issue of the International Court of Justice, yes, definitely justice means everything to our community. And without justice, there won't be any future of the community, of a traumatized and broken community on the one hand. And if people won't trust again, they won't go back to Sinjar area. So, and without Sinjar area, because it's the last traditional homeland of our community, there won't be a future of Yazidis at all. So for us, struggling for justice means also struggle to survive. So this is very clear for us. And that's why people like Hannah and also Sina are strong enough and tell their stories and want to share what also happened to them in order, yes, to ask for support. But on the one hand, it's not only an issue of Yazidis. Why? Because we have a legal basis like the UN Genocide Convention. So for the international community, of course, legal is to make use of this legal mechanism means to protect also these kind of achievements. And I hope very much that there is no need to experience war and violence by our own to be ready to struggle for these kind of values. So for the Yazidis, maybe I repeat it again, but yes, for us, it means everything because it means to protect for our own future. But on the other hand, the Yazidi case would also prove how serious the international community is with its own value. And the examples of, as I said, Russia, the attacks of Russia and also of Turkey are a good example. And we don't want to live in such a world, not only for us Yazidis, but also, of course, for every other community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think what Leyla said there very, very clearly and succinctly was what we've talked about for a long time. It's about that one of the most pressing aspects of this whole thing has been impunity, and whether it's impunity of the individual or whether impunity of the state. And there cannot be peace without justice, and either for the individuals or states, which they cannot simply be allowed to escape justice because it is too inconvenient for the world community to act, which I think is what we are witnessing now. It is an inconvenience, and we've got to continue making that case that cannot be allowed. So thank you again, Leyla, for all that you do. I'm going to hand over now to someone who probably needs no introduction, but is going to get one anyway. Evelina Okhab. She the APP Yazidis, let me be absolutely clear, we would not be here if it wasn't for Evelina. She is a force of nature. She has dragged this APPG from the doldrums that we were in between 17 and 19, and that sort of force of nature has dragged us to where we are today, and I cannot thank her enough. And APPG is only as good as its secretariat, and I don't know where she finds the time with all the other things that she has to do, but she has been the driving force, and I am personally hugely grateful for the work that she does, and it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Evelina.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And the truth is that APPG cannot work without parliamentarians like Brendan, like Baroness Kennedy, Fiona Bruce was here a moment ago as well, because without them, there is no APPG. I think that's very important to emphasize. And of course, Ahmed was one of the first individuals doing the secretariat. So again, thank you for your wonderful work
Yes.
doing the secretariat and making sure that the topic of the Yazidis is raised at this in this parliament. And I won't take too much time. I just wanted to mention what we do and why we do it. Of course, we know that over 8 years ago, Yazidis have been subjected to horrific atrocities. The atrocities are ongoing even now. And unfortunately, the topic of the Yazidi genocide is leaving the international fora, is leaving the any kind of discussions, whether here in Parliament, UN, and other places. And this is something what happens to every atrocity crime. It is not only in the case of the Yazidis, but this is why we want to have an APPG focused specifically on the Yazidis, not on more broad topics such as genocide or freedom of religion belief, but specifically on the Yazidis, to make sure that we raise the topic of the Yazidis here in Parliament. We try to engage parliamentarians and to make sure as well that parliamentarians then engage the government and trigger action. And with mixed results, of course, there have been some positive steps taken by the government, but ultimately at this stage, we need more push from parliamentarians. And we'll be also engaging more parliamentarians also from other parts of the world, and Brendan will mention it in a moment, but we want to see action, of course. We want to see justice for the survivors, and we want to make sure that this have some kind of future in Iraq, because of course, again, at this stage, we don't see that the protections are in place that will enable them to be able to return and flourish, that have normal life. At this stage, it doesn't look like this is going to happen unless we act, unless we introduce those mechanisms. And what we do very often is that we organize meetings here in Parliament. We produce briefings for parliamentarians for various debates. And this is to inform them about the situation, to make sure that they have all the information that is needed for them to make those arguments and to push pressure on the government to act. But over the next few months, we are hoping also to go to Iraq. We are currently looking into this option with our lovely professor from City Law School. No pressure. And then of course there will be few other activities. And for this, we need the work of, or we need to collaboration with various NGOs, including with YASDA. Nadia's initiative and Abid was here just a moment ago with YES and so on. And also with wonderful lawyers, with the Baroness Kennedy of Terry, Nadine from Amal's team. I think this is something that we need to do all together. And whether looking at legal avenues for justice, as already Leyla also mentioned, and Arif has been working on that as well. But everyone who's here is working on the topic of the Yazidis one way or another, and we just need more collaboration and then make sure that the topic of the Yazidis is not lost. There are many other atrocities that are happening, of course, and there will always be atrocities happening. Unfortunately, that's the reality. But we need to make sure that we don't drop one topic and move to another. We need to continue working on the situation of the Yazidis, this genocide. So I'll stop here, and I know that we have a few other things planned for today.
Thank you so much. In a moment, we'll go on to questions and contributions from the floor. We've got a wee bit of time, but I wanted to take this opportunity to, if you haven't met or seen the work of Hannah Rose Thomas, to introduce her to you and to suggest that you look at the work she has done. from day one, I think our very first meeting of the APPG on the Yazidis, Hannah's been involved, and she has been a great supporter, bringing her artwork into Parliament and introducing people to the plight of the Yazidi community through her artwork, and it's been an invaluable contribution, and we are hugely grateful for it. So Hannah, I'm going to ask you to just to give us an explanation of what it is you do, and perhaps talk about the portraits behind us, and particularly in reference to the Uyghur portrait that we are privileged to have unveiled with us today.
Well, thank you, Brendan. It's an honour to be with you all today. And to allow them the most recent portrait painting of Tersane Ziawardin. As Brendan mentions, she's a Uyghur survivor of sexual violence from the re-education camps in Xinjiang, to be unveiled alongside 3 of my portraits of Yazidi women and 2 self-portraits that were painted by the women as well. So my exhibition, Tears of Gold, is currently being exhibited at the PSVI conference, and it compiles 3 projects that I was working on since 2017, and collecting portraits together, portraits of Yazidi women in Iraqi Kurdistan, Rohingya women who have fled violence in Myanmar, and Nigerian women, survivors of Boko Haram, and also Fulani sexual violence. And the use of gold leaf in these portraits of Yazidi and Nigerian women is survivors of violence and violation. It's symbolic of their sacred value and dignity, in spite of all that they have suffered. It's meant to be reminiscent of icon paintings as well. And I had the honor of meeting these courageous women during my time organizing art workshops in Iraq and Bangladeshi refugee camps in northern Nigeria. And each of the women who took part in the project had a heart-rending story. And the hope was to create a safe space for them to be seen, heard, and accepted, and to begin to process their trauma. Key texts on trauma healing speak of 2 pivotal prerequisites: the creation of a safe space for the sharing of stories. However, what of an experience of violence that is unspeakable? How do individuals express and then heal from experiences that are beyond understanding or words? Can the arts help to give voice to that which eludes verbal communication or comprehension? Sharing our stories enables us to connect even across cultural and linguistic barriers. And it reminds us that we have more in common than what divides us. And this encounter helps us to heal. Desmond Tutu reminds us that it is our shared humanity, our shared losses, and our shared grief that ultimately allow us to reconnect again with the world around us. We are harmed together and we heal together. I always get very emotional when I share these stories. It's very hard not to, particularly being in the presence of survivors as well, which is an incredible honor. But John Paul Lederach said, healing is ultimately about the restoration of voice, both for individuals and communities. So during the art workshop with Yazidi women, I taught them how to paint their self-portraits as a way to share their stories with the rest of the world. And many of the women chose to paint themselves with glistening tears of gold to convey the grief for loved ones lost to civil captivity. You can see that on the painting on the far left over there. And the image on the right is painted by the lady in the middle here called Bassi. And it's of her being separated from her 6-year-old daughter. And so her daughter was still in captivity and so it has not been returned. So after learning to draw and paint for the first time, the Yazidi women then asked whether I would paint their portraits. And it felt an incredible privilege to be trusted to share their stories in this way. So following my return, I then poured my heart into painting these portraits of the courageous women. And I hope to capture just something of their extraordinary strength, resilience, and dignity, and show that these women have not been defined by what they've suffered. As women from religious minorities, they have suffered persecution, forced displacement, and many subjected to sexual violence. Due to the stigma surrounding such violence, they faced shame and isolation within the communities. And all too often, their stories remain unseen and unheard. The unlistened to story is described by Primo Levi as the enduring burden of the survivor. He says, why is the pain of every day translated so constantly into our dreams in the ever repeated story, scene of the unlistened to story? These women were and are survivors, and their lives cannot be reduced to a single violent experience. And through my portraits, I hope to convey something of the person behind the trauma in their extraordinary resilience and dignity. The hope was that these paintings would be shown a place for influence in the global north alongside the women's paintings to enable their voices to be heard and to advocate on their behalf. So the art projects and the advocacy exhibitions are underpinned by the same common thread of intention, the restoration of voice. I just wanted to end with the words of Declaration of Humanity that says, we affirm all survivors of sexual violence in conflict and children born of conflict-related sexual violence are innocent, of equal worth and value to all people. They are to be fully accepted, respected and honoured. And لن أنسى القصص المؤملة والشجاعة تلك النساء والفتيات على الرغم من كل شيء عانته النساء والفتيات. لا يمكن الوصول على عالم أكثر سلمية ومسؤولية إلا إذا تم الاعتراف بحقوق النساء الأساسية والحفاظ عليها بأوقات الحرب. شكرا لكم.
Thank you.
Can I just say, Benny, we're really sorry that we had to go and it's Paula here, she's, you know, it's weighing heavily on her, they're really tired. And she's got to return to attend to the car.